Hey everybody, it's Chris Petri. Welcome. You know what? I've been doing some new videos called Extreme Beginners, and I noticed maybe some of you have mentioned in the comments section. I got a few emails as well, and you're saying, "Hey Chris, these new Extreme Beginner videos, you're using a different palette and colors and so forth. I'm kind of finding it hard to figure out what you're doing with your colors and your paints when you're doing your paintings. So this is to just really, I'm just going to try to make a simple video here to explain the new palette that I'm using for Extreme Beginner series, because my Extreme Beginner series obviously is on my same channel as our normal videos that we do every week. So this is just to kind of get everybody kind of on the same page. I realize some of you are more, you're novices or you're even professional watercolor artists, so you're looking to find out what I'm doing with this new palette here, which is a Prang palette. And basically it's a inexpensive palette that you can buy. So I tell the beginners that are just starting out, we're trying to kind of keep us all together in one place here. So on YouTube, I'm trying to keep everyone together. We're all here as a family. And so for beginners, you're going to want to use an inexpensive palette because you don't know if you're going to stick with watercolors. You might try it for a few months and say, I just don't like it, and you're going to do something else, maybe sculpture or pastels or maybe acrylic painting or something, or oil painting. So not everybody's going to want to do watercolors. It's just a part of the game. Everybody's trying to find, as an artist, what they would like and what they want to do. But for the most part, most of you that are starting with watercolors, you're going to probably stick with it. But there are a few that are going to kind of go and do different things. So let's keep that kind of on the side burner. But for those of you that are just starting out with watercolor, you're better off just starting out with a simple set like a Prang Oval 16. That's made by Dixon. You can find this on, pretty much, you can find this on Amazon or eBay, or just a simple YouTube search. Or eBay search, anything like that, Google search. You can find this in your local art stores, like your big box stores like Michael's, or maybe like I think also Blix might have this, as well as some of the larger box stores probably have this palette. So it's a really good palette. This is the way I set it up. I take the paint pans out and I rearrange them, but for this I want to leave it this way, the way it comes stock. So when you open up your new palette, your new Prang palette like this, Oval 16 Prang, inexpensive, maybe $10, maybe even $5. You can get it probably online, maybe for $5. But when you open it up, it's going to look like this. What I eventually want you to do is to arrange it like this, where you have all your warmer colors over here, and then you start to work up to your greens, and then over here to your cooler colors, like your cooler greens and your blues and purples this side. So this is the way you should set it up eventually, similar to this. So I want you to set it up so that you have kind of like your warm colors on one side, your cool colors on the other. Does that make sense? That's how I set up all the other palettes that I have online that you'll see me using all the time. Just a little quick tidbit of information on that. But this is the stock way you'll see it when you get it delivered to your house, or if you go and buy it in a box store, an art store, art supply store, big box store, like your Michael's or so what have you. So what I want to make clear is that these colors are very similar to my regular palette colors that you'll see me use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this palette, the Prang palette, which we use on Extreme Beginners, and I'm going to give you the colors that these are as far as our regular palette that we use, that you always know we use our fresh tube paints. We use our Winsor Newtons, Holbein, M. Graham. We use, what else we use? We use all kinds of different tube paints, right? So let's not forget that this color selection is very similar to what we normally use with our Winsor & Newton, Holbein paints, M. Graham paints. What else do we use? You name it. So whatever paints you use, chances are this Prang Oval 16 paint set is going to have the similar color match to what you're using. So that's what we're going to do here is we're going to explain and put out the colors on a piece of watercolor paper so that you can kind of like follow along. So if I'm doing an extreme beginners video and you want to paint those paintings, you might be saying, hey Chris, what colors are you using there? I can't tell. It's a Prang set. I don't have that. I have M. Graham paints, or I have Winsor & Newton paints, or I have Holbein paints, or I have Daniel Smith paints, or whatever it is. I'm going to give you the basic color that you would find in watercolor tube sets according to this Prang set, okay? So let's figure that out, and let's do it here. And let's, first of all, I'm just going to use the brush that they give us with the Prang set. So this Prang oval 16 set here of colors, they give us a brush with that. So we're going to use that brush to do our color swatches here, and then we're going to give you what color equals back to the colors of the tube paints that we use. So I'm going to use this. I use Winsor Newton and I use Holbein paints pretty much 99% of the time. So I'm going to give you the colors that match the Holbein and Winsor Newton colors that I use according to this Holbein set, if that makes sense. So this way, if you're following along and you have Holbein or Winsor Newton paints in your palette, you'll be able to match them to this one with no problem. So let's start out. We'll start out right here. And I'm just going to dampen my brush and then go over to the paint. And we'll do the first swatch up here. You can see that, right? Wonderful. This is what you would call a alizarin crimson or rose madder. So I'll paint that on there. And then what I'll do is we'll write it down. Okay, so we'll write this down. This is rose madder slash alizarin crimson. That's our first red. It's the cooler red of the two reds that we have in this palette. Okay, so that's the first red we have, and this would be Holbein color or Winsor Newton color, or Daniel Smith might have the same color. You have to check, but this is pretty much what we have. The next color is going to be, we're just going to dampen this palette just a little bit. I want to have really good rich color. I don't want to start flooding my paints with too much water, so that's why I'm not using a lot of water. And then we're going to do our next swatch, and our next swatch here is going to be cadmium red. So that pretty much matches my palette that I usually use, that you see me use all the time. This is pretty much a cadmium red. Cadmium red. There we go. So let's just keep these nice and organized like that. Okay, so this is cadmium red for the most part, you know, close. Doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just trying to give you the colors that I find are very similar to what I use in my normal palette that I use every day on my YouTube channel. We have started a Extreme Beginners series, and this is the new palette we use for Extreme Beginners. So this way, if you want to paint along with us on Extreme Beginners, even though you might be more, you know, professional level or novice level, you're not a beginner, you can still use this palette, or you can use your palette to match the colors. Okay. And then next, we're going to just take this, and then we're going to see what we have here. Ah, look at that. We all know what that is. Cadmium orange. Okay, cadmium orange. So I'm just kind of putting the colors down as I see them. So that you have the power as you go forward. When you're clicking onto an Extreme Beginners video, you can just jump in there and start doing the exercises, the compositions, and the paintings. And when I'm using this palette, you can use your own palette that you normally use, which is our normal palettes, which have all of these colors. Okay, so now this here. Wow, look at that. Beautiful. We could call this maybe cadmium orange light. Not something we have in our my normal palette, but still looks good. You might be able to mix this with a little bit of yellow to come up with like a yellow ochre, because this next yellow we're going to make, and we're going to cover this too. Once we're done with all the major colors here, then we're going to go in and start realizing that we can mix a few of these together to maybe create more of an accurate representation of our normal palette that we use. So let's start with this here again. Let's keep moving forward. This is more of a lemon yellow, I would say. Cool yellow. Okay, so let's call this one cadmium yellow. Maybe lemon. That's a lemon. That's kind of cool. It's a cool yellow. Cadmium yellow lemon. Okay, let's keep going here. Now we're going to go with a pretty light green. There we have it. So we do another swatch, and we'll call this, I would call this kind of like an olive green. That's pretty close to an olive green. Olive green. Okay, and then we're just going to put a little line over here. And we're going to keep working our colors. Let's go up and keep moving on here. This is going to be probably, let's see how we look here. Okay, so we can call this a sap green. And what's our next color? This is going to be our Viridian. See that? Ooh, look how beautiful that looks, that Viridian green. It's kind of like that turquoise green kind of look to it. So we're going to put our turquoise green. Okay. And we'll call this Viridian. Which is a green. It's just called Viridian. I always say Viridian green just so people remember that it's green, but Viridian is really just the the color you'll see on the tube of the paint. So that's our Viridian. Okay, now what do we have next? Let's move over to here. So remember, I'm using the same order that it comes in the palette when you buy it stock. So if you buy this Prang palette, from the internet, or if you go to the store and you buy it, hey, you know what? This is exactly how it's going to look. So I'm just doing my color swatches according to going one at a time through the palette. I'm going to show you as the video progresses, I'm going to show you how I set it up. I take these all out. They come right out real easy. I take these all out and I rearrange them because I like them to be in certain sections just the way I like it. And I want you to do the same thing. So, but for making it easier, I want you to do it this way. So, let's see what we have here. I can just put it out and look at it and go, okay, I know what it is. Okay. Now I might need to put a few more out here to maybe to figure it out, because blues can kind of be deceiving as you go and you start painting your blues in. You might think one is like an ultramarine blue, and the next thing you know it's something different like a Prussian blue. So that's why I'm going to just do a few here so that I don't get loused up and give you the wrong information. Okay. There we go. I'm just going to go right down the line here. And this solidifies what I needed to know, which was how these all shape up as I put them out onto the paper, and I say, okay, yeah, now I know what they look like here. Okay, so let's do this. One there, one there, one there, one there. Okay, this one up here, this is purple, so we're going to call this Ultra Marine Violet. And then the next one in the palette is going to be French Ultramarine Blue. French Ultramarine Blue. Then we're going to have Prussian Blue. Also, we could call that cerulean. Cerulean. If you lighten this up and use less water, more water, less paint, you could make that into a cerulean blue. And this is a lavender color. Beautiful color, I should say. So, we're working our way across the paper here. Let's make another line across our paper, like so. There we go. All right, so now we're going to continue on. We're carrying on here. So we left off here, we got 3 more colors. Let's keep working on this. So let's continue with our Prang brush. And then let's go with our white. This is white paint. Now, if you're going to do white paint, you got to add a little bit of color to it. Let's add a little bit of black to it. Okay. And let's call this white with a touch of black for a smoky type look. We could also call this titanium white. So there you have it. Basically a titanium white or a Chinese white. You could call that a Chinese white too. Would work both ways. And then we're going to go with brown. Very simple. This is going to be our burnt umber. So we're going to just put our swatch out on the paper. And this is going to be burnt umber. And I just keep mentioning the same type of information as I go along here. We're taking these colors and giving you the colors that match our normal palette we use all the time on our normal videos, where I have my normal palette out, so we don't kind of mix up the process here of what colors are we using. So that's burnt umber, and then of course this here is going to be ivory black, a warm black. It's not cool. And again, we're going to go over how you can adjust these colors in this palette to make additional colors. So this black in this palette, the Prang Oval 16 by Dixon, I'm giving you what the color is according to our normal palette, ivory black. Okay, so there it is. These are all the colors, pretty much for the most part really spot on. So when you're doing these colors here and you're looking at these colors on your new palette, you just ordered your new Prang palette, because maybe you're going to want to work with this palette when you're doing extreme beginner videos, even though you're a pro and you're working with our normal palette that we use when we're using, you know, the other colors that we use. Obviously we use Winsor Newton, we use Holbein, we use Daniel Smith paints, we use Holbein, we use M. Graham paints, whatever paint you like to use. The tube paints, you know, the beautiful tube paints that we use. These paints are just as beautiful. They're just a little bit less expensive, so you save money when you buy this palette. And these are what the new beginners are using, because the new beginners don't want to go out and spend hundreds of dollars on paints if they don't know if they're going to continue painting in watercolor. They're going to go on to sculpture or acrylics or oil paintings or who knows what, but they're probably most everyone's going to stay with watercolors on the extreme beginners. But there are going to be a few people that kind of, you know, disperse and do something different because they get bored or whatever else, you know, whatever else it is. The same with myself too, of course. I started with oils when I was really young and then gave up on that, but whatever. So here it is. Pretty much for the most part, this palette equals all the colors you normally use with your fresh squeezed tube paints, with your Winsor Newtons, your Holbeins, your M. Grahams, your Daniel Smiths, and your favorite tube paints that you like to use, your more higher end type paints. So what I'm going to do is we're going to take a break, and then when we come back, I'm going to switch out this paper and I'm going to create other colors from this chart that give you a few more options if you want to create even additional colors if you're painting and you want to kind of branch out and make a little more variations on these paints. So it's a lot of information here, but I hope most of you are going to catch on to this and you kind of follow me already. You know what I'm doing here. But others that are not following so much, what I did was I took this Prang set that we use for all extreme beginners, and we just gave you the colors that match your normal palettes that you use if you're a pro, you know, and you've been painting a long time and you're using tube paints and everything. So it gives you the colors that it kind of match over to this. And then what we're going to do next, just in a few minutes, we're going to come back and we're going to even take these colors and we're going to mix a little more with this palette. We're going to mix a little more and give you more options as to the different colors that you can create for your normal paints that you use, your tube paints that you use, okay? So I hope this isn't too confusing, but I know most of you are following along 100%, no problem. And some of you are thinking, what is he doing? So no worries, we'll come right back and we're going to do some more mixing to try to take these colors and mix them even more to get even more variations on these colors that are going to match your tube paints that you use on a normal basis. If you're a novice or a pro artist and you're already using all the fancy tube paints and you really are using high quality art materials, which is totally fine. I use the same thing. I'm more or less been doing this a long time, 15, 20 years. So I'm using all of the best tube paints that I can use, but beginners aren't going to use that. So, okay, let's come right back and we're going to make some more color mixes off of these colors to give you a little more of a selection. Okay, be right back. All right, everybody, it's Chris Petri here. Thanks for coming by again. And, we're getting into our second part of our video here. The first part of our video we just covered very simply. We covered our Prang Oval 16 watercolor set, which is very inexpensive. This costs only about $10 online or at your big box stores like your Michaels or your Blick's art stores or your local art supply stores. And basically what I did was I took the palette and put it on the table here just like you would have it if you opened it up brand new. So this is the same exact way you would open up your palette and see it brand new, and you set it down. And then we put our colors out onto a paper and we said, all right, these are all the colors that would match our normal colors that we use on a daily basis here on my channel. So I've sort of created a new part to my channel where I'm bringing along extreme beginners, people that are just starting out. So if you're just starting out in watercolor, and I hope you're going to subscribe, there's the subscribe button right down below here on the right hand side. I forget to mention that sometimes, but if you subscribe on the right hand side, there's a button, subscribe, and there's also a little bell icon. And if you click that bell icon and you click all notifications, you'll get my videos every week, and every day that we make videos, you'll get it right away. It'll be in your YouTube channel, so that if you're subscribed to YouTube, you'll get it. It'll let you know that it's right there ready for you to click on and watch, so you won't miss anything. That's the reason why I always say if you subscribe, you're all set. So what we did was we said, all right, some of you have been with my channel a long time, and thank you so much for being here. And I know many of you are doing beautiful work. You're absolutely doing just incredible watercolors. You're sending me some of your paintings online. You're sending me emails with your paintings. They look absolutely wonderful. They're more progressive and better than I was doing when I first started watercolors. I have to say that, because when I first started watercolors, I did it all on my own. I was watching some YouTube videos and things, but I don't know, I just wasn't maybe paying attention as much or whatever. But since you're locked into my channel, you're going to have a lot more success. If you just stick here, subscribe, and keep following my channel, your watercolors are going to get fantastic quickly, because I cover the basics all the time, every video, and I keep repeating the same information over and over, which means you're going to learn the same information over and over and over, which means it'll be locked in, you'll have it memorized, and you'll always do it when you're painting, which means your paintings are going to be better. You're going to have more success. If you're following your own instincts or trying to just figure it out on your own, you're not going to get that much success. Simple as that. You got to follow somebody that's already had success and can show you the way to get success with your paintings. And that's why I'm here. I'm showing you what I did after I did all the work for you, basically. I failed and made all my mistakes and learned everything as I went along in watercolor. And now I'm showing you all the ways around all the problems and issues that you're going to have, so that you don't have to worry. I'm showing you and giving you the way quicker, giving you a faster and quicker way to get better watercolors by doing my videos and giving you all the information you need. So I'm really excited about that, because I want to see you get excited about watercolors and keep painting. I don't want you to take your paintings and your palettes and your brushes and throw them into the drawer and just leave them in there, or leave them in the closet, or leave them in the basement, or wherever, whatever. I don't want to see that. I want to see you stick with watercolors. So stick with us here week by week. month by month and year by year, you'll get better and better all the time. All right? So that's why I'm doing this here. I'm here for you. So we were doing the colors. This is a Prang Oval 16 paint set. You would get stock. You'd open it up like this. You open up your set. This is what you see. And this is what we did here, the colors. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how you can take some of these colors and mix them a little together to get a little bit of a variation on things. Okay? So now, Rose Madder and Alizarin Crimson, that pretty much stays the same. You're not going to need to adjust that too much. You're going to be fine with that. Cadmium Red. Cadmium Red now, this one looks a little bit more orange than Cadmium Red might look. Cadmium Red is a little redder, so I would say if you want to get more of a truer Cadmium Red, you're going to want to take your Rose Madder Alizarin Crimson and then mix that with your Cadmium Red, which we're showing you here. And can you see that? This looks more like cadmium red. This is a little bit more orange than cadmium red would usually look. So I had to add some of the Rose Madder Alizarin Crimson color here to this color to get you more of a cadmium red. So what I'm saying is, if you want to get this a little bit truer to cadmium red, you're going to need to add to this color a little bit of the Rose Madder Alizarin Crimson color, if that makes sense. Okay? Now, cadmium orange looks pretty good. I'd have to say this cadmium orange looks fine. You don't have to probably do too much to that. That looks like cadmium orange. Now, cadmium orange light. This, I could say that if we want to get a yellow ochre, we should mix cadmium lemon yellow and cadmium orange light to get a yellow ochre. So let's do that. Let's see how that looks. Cadmium orange light. Okay, so we have a cadmium orange light, and then we add a little bit of the cadmium lemon yellow. And if you mix two of those together, cadmium orange light and cadmium lemon yellow, you're going to sort of get a more of it like a yellow ochre color. Can you see that? How if you mix these two together, you're going to get a yellow ochre. So let's cadmium red. And this is going to be yellow ochre. By adding these two together. This is something where you'd probably have to take notes while you're doing this video. While you're watching me do this video, it's probably better if you take some notes, because I can't really make all the correct notes on my paper here. It's getting kind of a little bit too much information on one piece of paper. But remember that to get a yellow ochre, you're going to need to add cadmium orange light and cadmium lemon yellow on this palette to get a yellow ochre, pretty much, with maybe even a little touch of burnt umber. And I'm just trying to give you options here, especially if you've been painting a while and you might want to use this palette, but you're not sure on if you can get the same colors you always use on a daily basis. So you can see what I'm doing. I've taken the cadmium orange light, cadmium lemon yellow, added a touch of the brown here, which we're calling burnt umber, and that gives you a yellow ochre. So you can create your own yellow ochre from the colors in this palette, and that's how we do it, according to what I'm trying to do here. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'm trying to give you more options. This can also pass for a raw sienna. So you could say this too is like a raw sienna. Okay. Now, I think we're good up to that point. Now we're saying olive green. Well, this green, I would say this looks more like a leaf green. Have you ever seen a leaf green? I know Winsor Newton makes a beautiful leaf green. I use it. It's a beautiful green. This olive green, this looks a little bit too bright for an olive green. So let's see if we can get a more true olive green. Let's take the green here, our olive green that we're calling this here olive green. We'll put this out onto the palette, and then we're saying, how can we make this look more like the true olive green that we normally use? I would say we use a little bit of brown. And let's see if we can mix that together. And then a little more green. And I think you might agree with me that adding a touch of brown, which we're calling burnt umber, on this palette, that we get more of an olive green with that. So let's call this olive green with burnt umber. Again, I would definitely encourage everybody, take your time with this video if you want to, if you think this is something you want to do, where you want to start to use this palette with your painting regimen, as you're painting along with us here on my channel. You'll get a really nice olive green if you add a little bit of burnt umber, just a touch of burnt umber to your green here, this green. Okay, now we're going to go up to here, sap green. That looks pretty good for a sap green. I would say that looks good. I'm not going to really mention much on this one. I think that looks good for sap green. This one here, Viridian. I think for Viridian, this looks a little bit, might need a little more, I would say I'm going to leave that. I'm going to leave that as it is. That looks pretty good for Viridian. Let's see if we can get that Viridian a little better according to our normal palette. So let's take this, which is our Viridian color, like that. That looks pretty good when we're using a lot of water. And can we make this a little more Viridian? How does Viridian look? I would have to say this looks pretty good. This color matches Viridian pretty well, I think. So we don't have to really do much to that one. And the same thing with this sap green. That looks pretty good. Ultramarine violet. I think this ultramarine violet looks pretty good. I don't think we need to do anything to that. That looks pretty good. French ultramarine blue. Now this might be something we might have to adjust. French ultramarine blue. Okay, can we add anything to this? I would say our French ultramarine blue looks pretty good. I don't think we have to add anything to that. That could pass as cobalt too. So let's do that. Let's say French ultramarine blue or cobalt blue. Oh, that's actually ultramarine violet. So how can we, if you give me 1 minute, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to take some white out and do that. So we just put some white out there. The French ultramarine looks good. This can be cobalt blue too. So let's use cobalt and say cobalt blue. That can be cobalt blue too as well. That's pretty close. Prussian blue, that looks pretty good. Cerulean blue, that looks pretty good too. I would say Prussian blue. To get a cobalt blue, I mean a cerulean blue, cerulean. To get a cerulean, we might have to grade it down a little bit with some brown. That's the only thing I would say with this. To get a cerulean blue, you need to add a little touch of brown, burnt umber on this palette, burnt umber here, to get a cerulean blue. Can you see how I added that little bit of brown and it looks more, it looks more like cerulean? Prussian blue can be cerulean, but you just have to add a little bit of brown to it, a little bit of the burnt umber. And then you have your cerulean blue. That looks fine. Now, lavender looks fine. I don't think we need to do anything with lavender. I think it looks fine. That's this one here. That's an absolutely wonderful, beautiful color, lavender. Yeah, lavender looks fine. I don't think we have to do anything with that. That looks good. Okay, ivory black. Now, ivory black, let's say we want to make a Payne's gray. Okay, so you have an ivory black and you want to make Payne's gray, because we usually use Payne's gray as well. Simple enough. You just take some of that ivory black and you add some blue. Add some blue to that. Some of the French ultramarine blue. And if you mix that around, you're going to get, with the French ultramarine blue and the ivory black, you're going to get that nice, beautiful Payne's gray, which is a cooler black. Ivory black is a warm black. Black with, like, more of like the warmer colors maybe in there. So we'll call this a Payne's gray. And you can try this as you go. And our burnt umber is fine. I think our burnt umber is looking just like our normal burnt umber is. And then our white is fine. I added a little bit of ivory black to our white just to give you an idea, but this white here is pretty much like a Chinese white. So you could really call this white here Chinese white, because it has a chalky look to it. It's not, it's pretty chalky, this white in this palette. So let's call that Chinese white. All right, so now we've gone over all the colors. You can even do some more adjustments to it, but I think you'll kind of see how when you have a palette like this, the Prang palette, you can really mix with a little bit of adjustments. You can mix and get all the colors you normally use in my normal palette that I use all the time on YouTube, which is my Winsor & Newton and Holbein colors, the the tube colors that I use in my palette, you can get all the same colors pretty much with a few little minor adjustments. You can kind of see what did we actually adjust here. Well, we said rose madder and alizarin crimson is fine. That works fine. That really works well. Our cadmium red here, this color, is a little bit not quite as red as a cadmium red, so we added a little bit of rose madder and alizarin crimson to get our cadmium red here. Our cadmium orange looks fine. Here, our cadmium orange light looks fine, or cadmium orange looks fine. Cadmium lemon yellow looks fine. If we want to make a yellow ochre or a raw sienna, you can take your cadmium orange and add a little bit of brown, burnt umber as we call it, brown, to that to give yourself a yellow ochre. And that yellow ochre can also be could be a raw sienna as well. So there you have those colors in this bit of section here. Olive green, we said that this green here is a little bright. It looks a little bit more toward the cadmium lemon yellow color. So if we want to make it more of an olive green, we just add a little bit of brown. And as you can see, if you add a little bit of brown to this green here, and you add a little bit of brown, you'll get more of an olive green, a more true olive green than you would if you just use this. Okay, and then over here, sap green looks fine. Viridian green looks fine. So we're looking at the other greens. Sap green looks fine. Viridian green looks fine. Looks like a viridian to me. This looks like a sap green pretty much. Ultramarine violet up here looks fine. Looks like an ultramarine violet to me. Pretty close, very close. French ultramarine blue. Now we're getting into the blues. We're kind of, doing a little more, getting a little more dicey in here. French ultramarine blue, which we're calling this blue here. We could add, that looks pretty good. This could pass for a French ultramarine blue or a cobalt blue. So that's good. So your French ultramarine blue can pass as a cobalt blue, maybe a little bit more water, and you have a cobalt blue, a little more paint and less water, you'll have a French ultramarine blue. But that's pretty true to a cobalt blue or a French ultramarine blue, which are pretty close. Prussian blue, here we go, right there. So this Prussian blue, which we're calling Prussian blue, you add a little bit of brown, and you'll get a cerulean color, cerulean blue. So you can make a cerulean blue from your Prussian blue by adding a little tiny bit of burnt umber here to get that. Lavender, we said, here is fine. We don't need to do anything to lavender. That looks great. Your white color, which we're calling kind of like a Chinese white or a titanium white, fine. You don't need to do anything to that. That white is going to perform for you much like a Chinese white would or a titanium white. Burnt umber, pretty much the same thing. Burnt umber is going to be just like your normal burnt umber you use in your palette if you're using my normal palette on an everyday basis. And then ivory black, we said, is a little bit different now. Ivory black here on this palette is more of a true ivory black. And if you want to make it a Payne's gray, you just have to add a little bit of the French ultramarine blue. So that's pretty much taking your ivory black there and adding a little French ultramarine blue. And when you add that French ultramarine blue to your black, you get that cooler looking black, which is a Payne's gray. So you can kind of see how that looks. That's a cool black with a little bit of that blue in the black there. Versus if you just went with a plain old ivory black, that's just black. And there's no real coolness to it. So again, I'm glad you joined us, and we'll see you on the next video. Please remember, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video, okay? Bye-bye.